Yes, thanks a lot, Davey, for this very nice introduction, and thanks a lot for giving me the opportunity to present this work. So actually, this is accumulated work over the last years where I started to get some interest for deep learning. And I was originally an ice flow modeler, and at some point I found pretty interesting and very promising what we could get by mixing some traditional numerics and deep learning. I also want to acknowledge there is a couple of people that have been working on that project. So I'm going to talk about this IGM, which I call the instructive glacier model, and the instructive directly refer to the usage of deep learning. So it's a glacier evolution model, which is coded in Python, and which is mostly designed for doing some very computationally efficient runs. So basically, I'm going to, first of all, give some background and some rationale about why, what are the limitations of traditional model, and where we could probably do something better for modeling glaciers. And then I'm going to present which is a core of IGM, which is especially the emulation strategy for modeling the ice flow. I will talk about inverse modeling because it's hard not to talk about inverse modeling after talking about forward modeling, because it's really all what has to do with data assimilation. And then I hope at the end I can do a short demo of the code of the video. Is the only thing that I figure out right before that, because I'm on Zoom, basically everything is very demanding, and I actually have very little resources available for doing this. And the test I did was not super fast, so it's not very promoting the code. I hope it's going to improve. Let's see. Okay, background and rationale. Glacier evolution model, just to give a basic glacier evolution model are basically given basal topography, initial condition, and climate forcing. They couple at least an ice flow model, which intends to simulate or to compute the ice dynamic, surface mass balance, or SMB, and then the two of them are coupled through the mass conservation. So it's really, I would say, the least we can require. And then, of course, according to what we want to do, we may want to add some thermodynamic, some subglacial hydrology, some calving. There are many things we can add according to the simulation data. Just to very short illustration of what is a glacier, what is the intention of a glacier evolution model. Here you can see a model of the Int'l glacier that I did quite some years ago with Stokes, the traditional model. A rationale for a new glacier evolution model, obviously there is an increasing demand for such a model. We want to have more physics, we want to have higher resolution, we also want to have some longer time scales. And there is something which I would like to emphasize, and I think it's pretty important. I just want to illustrate with a video. So it's something that this animation is a result of a paper that was published last year, where I used a parallel ice sheet model, PISM, to simulate the evolution of glacier over the Alps during the last glacial cycle. So here we are talking about 100,000 years. And there is something to retain out of this, is that in fact what we are modeling here, we are modeling many times some advances and retreat of glaciers. And in a way, we could think about why are we recomputing and recomputing all the time the same thing? And is there not a way, instead of recomputing many times, instead to store this information and then possibly to reuse this at lower price? Another thing is that obviously parallel computing is a key to achieve significant speed up, especially the GPUs. And GPUs is a very big topic. So I very shortly drafted what is the difference between a CPU and a GPU here. So for instance, on the laptop I'm giving this presentation, I have a CPU which is down of 6 processors, which are very, very rapid, but I only have 6. On the other hand, I have a GPU, which means that I have a lot of processors. I have almost 6,000, I believe, but they are much less rapid. So which means that I have much less, so the threads are thinner. But obviously, if we are capable to parallelize all the workload on such an architecture, that's where we may have a very huge gain of, and that's really the key to get some important speed up. But all the challenges to really to migrate and to be capable to parallelize our operation and then to migrate on the GPU. I just want to give an example of okay. Yeah, so this is just a video and simulation that I did with IGM. So, but this I run on my laptop basically. So on my laptop, I could treat some arrays which were 2000 times 2000, and as you can see, it took about an hour to get 1000 years of computation. And really, the key of this, behind of this, is really it's the way of using the GPU instead of the CPU. So you can really summarize here, if you have very large arrays that in input and in output, all the benefit you can get if you are capable to use this GPU instead of the CPU. So again, all the problem is how to vectorialize or how to parallelize all operation of a glacial evolution model, and hopefully while keeping the modeling framework pretty simple. And here I'm going to do everything in Python, which is now the most popular programming language. Clearly speaking, in ice flow modeling, the main computational bottleneck is the ice flow. Surface mass balance could be demanding, especially if we do some small type step, but usually that's not, those things parallelize very well. Solving the mass conservation could be numerically annoying, but that's not expensive. On the other hand, here we usually have to solve if we want to solve some higher order model, we have to solve 3D partial differential equation, and that's usually the real bottleneck. And that's exactly where the emulation strategy enters the game. So what I'm going to do instead of, all the strategy is to say we will replace this traditional solver by a so-called convolutional neural network. So it's a very popular machine learning model, which is trained from high order model. And that's what I'm going to explain in the next slide, that what is a CNN and how it is trained. That's what I'm going to explain. So all the strategy is, instead of taking the pathway above, it means that instead of taking my input, solving Stokes equation and then getting my output, instead I want to go the other way around. I want to go for a cheap way to design a deep learning surrogate model, or surrogate model is also a synonym from emulators. Okay, how am I going to do this? So basically what we want to do, this is a representation, a layer-wise representation of CNN. Mathematically speaking, well, usually when we say a neural network, it may look a bit weird, but in fact, mathematically speaking, it's nothing else than a sequence of composition of linear and nonlinear functions. And that's usually in the AI world, they like to represent this layer-wise. But instead of behind this, it is just a composition of functions, and they are linear functions which are so-called trainable, which means that they have some weight that we want to optimize to minimize a certain quantity, and this is what we call the training. And here what I want to do, instead of, ideally I want to design a convolutional neural network which would take the input, what I would give as a parameter boundary condition of a Stokes model, and I would like ideally to get on the right-hand side a solution which is maybe not the Stokes solution, but something which is close to. The former approach that I proposed with the first paper was to do to kind of split the problem into two parts and to see this problem as a pure data scientist, I would say. So the idea was to say, okay, I'm going to take my favorite ice flow model. I actually used a different model. I used MRIs, I used PISM in order to produce some simulation. So I took 10 glaciers a bit randomly. In fact, they are not existing glaciers. I just took some topography. I prescribed some surface mass balance in order to produce a certain glacier catalog. What I wanted to have is sort of having large glaciers, thin, thick, fast ice, slow ice, a bit of everything, so that to create a certain diversity that I would like to learn from. So I basically created this catalog, and then the next step was to take those data and then train my convolutional neural network, or say differently, it's optimizing the weight behind the layers that minimize a mismatch to the data. So which means Say differently, I require the neural network to reproduce as close as possible all the data that was collected, and that was the result, all those model realizations that came from Elmer or PISM according to the instructor model. So in fact, it proved to work pretty quickly, and I was starting with this, doing my first steps in the machine learning, and I was very surprised because it quickly proved to be extremely to show a very high fidelity with respect to the to some benchmark tests. But the main problem of this approach is that our neural network hardly generalize, and we are really kind of depending on our external model run. Say differently, if we are training this on mountain glacier, of course, don't expect it to be capable to model an ice sheet, which sounds kind of obvious, but this is really the problem of generalization. And that's the reason why I actually came with a paper last year with a new technique, which in fact was using, strictly speaking, the same neural network. It was just a matter of changing the training strategy. So instead of trying to match some data that was obtained by some ice flow model, the idea is that to use this so-called physics-informed neural network. And if we go back to the equation of here, I take the Blatter-Patin equations because it's a slight simplification of the Stokes equation, and it's pretty nice because we only are solving the horizontal velocities. The nice thing is that any ice flow models, they can be written in terms of an energy. So and here I basically presented the Blatter-Patin model in terms of an energy, where you can see there are three different terms. One corresponds to the ice shearing, one corresponds to the friction, and one corresponds to the gravity. And you recognize some well-known parameters here: Glenn exponent, Arrhenius factor, and sliding coefficient. So basically, when we are solving Blatter-Patin, most of typically finite element solver actually are also optimizers, so which means they are thinking for the velocity field that minimizes this function. So it's not very often written in terms of a minimization, but in fact that's what the algorithm does. And now we end it. So basically, the main idea of this physics-informed deep learning was instead of trying to minimize a misfit to some data which was obtained, why not directly trying to minimize the energy associated to Blatter-Patin? And that's actually exactly what we did. And the nice thing is that we had much more generic approach. We can model any kind of ice flow, and this could be seen as a real alternative to a solver, actually. And we could solve any ice geometry, any special resolution, so we have something way more generic. And the nice thing is that the training, actually, that was done before offline, which means that there were really two steps where we first generated some data, then learned from the data, and then at some point when we were training the neural network, we were just moving to prediction, and then we could do some real prediction. Here now the training is completely customized. Machine learning-wise, it is called unsupervised because we don't actually need the velocities. In fact, we don't compute the velocities. We train this neural network to minimize this, but we don't explicitly compute them. And it's done on the fly. So which means that any time step when I'm running the glacier evolution model, in fact, I'm doing two different things. I update, first of all, the emulator, which means I do a small part of training, and then I evaluate the CNN because I need to evaluate the solution, and then I can update the ice thickness. And the nice thing is that it means that at any time step, basically, we have an emulator, which is, as an emulator, it means that it cannot pretend to be as generic as a Blatter-Patin model, but at any time it's very customized, basically, to the glacier we are interested in. And each time step, we are sort of adjusting the knowledge so that we have something which is always kind of customized to the glacier that we are tracking. And anytime, and that's really the idea of having this. And the nice thing out of this is that we can actually work with some neural network which are not that huge. Just to give you an idea, there are about 100,000 weight behind this. So it's only 10, 15 layers. For an AI model, it's very light. So the nice thing is that we can sort of take benefit of all automatic differentiation tools which are coming with machine learning framework. And here I'm using TensorFlow behind this, and then we can use a GPU for training. So which means that basically all the training tools are the ones that are inherited, the one that we use for training any machine learning model we would use. So we really take benefit of this toolbox in some way. And the nice thing is that our convolutional network gets a certain memory capability, and that's what I want to explain on the next slide. But before, I just wanted to show you an example of just some ice flows that would be obtained. This is on the left-hand side. Solution obtained by a solver. So that's what I would do in a traditional, if I was running a traditional model. And that on the middle, this is something that would be emulated ice flows that would be obtained by using this neural network. Instead, as you can see, the two of them, we can barely see any difference. And then if we plot the difference between the two, we see they are very close to each other. Of course, this one is sort of customized for that glacier, and then we would have to readapt again a bit through the computation. Now, I just want to illustrate the memory capability because this is very important. If you remember, the first example I've shown, where we see those glaciers growing and retreating over the Alps during a full glacial cycle, where actually, if we look a bit too carefully, it's like if we are modeling 50 times a bit the same thing, the glacier advancing, retreating, advancing, retreating. Here, I just want to carry a very simple experiment. So I just show you the result of this experiment. I just take the LH glacier and I play the game of increasing and decreasing the ELA just to have glaciers that increase and that decrease. It's completely, it's an exercise, so it doesn't intend to reproduce anything. But the reason of why I'm showing you this exercise is that, so this is basically the forcing, this is the ELA. And so basically in the step I shown before, there are two different things. There is a training and then the emulation itself. So which means evaluating the CNN itself, this is something which is very cheap, especially on the GPU, because this operation parallelizes very well. On the other hand, the retraining itself, it's a bit more expensive because here we really have to do some gradient descent. We have to do some, in AI vocabulary, this is some backtracking to compute the gradients and then to do some steps. So it's also memory-wise more consuming. The thing is that, yes, this is expensive, this is more expensive. The retraining is the good news is that, in fact, because of this memory capability, there is really a way to absolutely mitigate those costs. And I just show you an illustration of this mitigation of the cost. So here we do the glaciers that increase and decrease, and then for the first stage, this is the error. Basically, this is the error that I'm doing by emulating instead of solving. So I want this to be low, which means that if I have a low value, that it means that my emulator is doing a very good job at reproducing what a solver would do. And in the first phase, I kind of invest some my money. I do some intense retraining, which means it's costly. And then after one pass, I basically release the training. And what we see, if we release the training, if we don't train anymore, then the error is going up, which is kind of expected, because then, which means we are not maintaining any knowledge, and then we are basically the error is rising. On the other hand, we could afford to have a very light retraining, which means we don't necessarily have to retrain, every time step, but instead we can do this pretty lightly, and then we can maintain a very good accuracy. And which means that here's what I rate. So the retraining can be really strongly mitigated. And then if we do this every 10 iteration at the end, those costs are going not to be that important. Just to sort of wrap up of this, it means that if we are doing, and in general, in many applications, we are doing things which are not dramatically different. Some are interested to do some long time scale, which glaciers that are retreating. In fact, they are meeting stages that are pretty similar. Some others are interested to vary parameters, to explore parameters, but in some way they come back to some states they saw before already often. So all of this is to say that basically the main advantage of this is that we are kind of saving some knowledge. We are not losing all the knowledge that we have as if you would use a kind of a traditional solver, but instead we are saving this and we are really taking advantage of this. Just a pretty technical slide. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, just for those that are wondering how much is that traditional numerics, how much is deep learning, and I want just to show that how what we are proposing is actually a merge of some traditional numerics. So on the left, I represented something, a very classical slide of what we want to do if we are solving a partial differential equation with finite elements. We are basically approximating the function with a certain approximation space, which is spanned by some basis function. Now, if we are training a neural network, what we have a data set, and we are also solving a minimization problem, and then we are trying to minimize the misfit to the data. And here, it's really the merging of the two. Instead, we are basically with this physics-informed neural network, which means that we are basically minimizing the weight to minimize this energy. In fact, we could see this as a way of doing some finite elements. The only thing that is changing is the approximation space, which is spanned by a neural network instead of finite elements. So that's where we could see this point of convergence. But I don't want to be more technical now. Now I would like to talk about inverse modeling because it's also a very important topic. In fact, this is probably what spent most of people when, as soon as the data assimilation is done properly, the forward is way more under control. But you know, this inverse modeling or this data assimilation is basically the goal is we have some blue observations. This could be surface velocity. This could be some ice radar profile. This could be some top surface topography. And then there are a certain number of functions of variables we would like to sort of estimate, which are the rate factor, which could be sliding coefficient, which will be ice thickness profile. And there is a huge benefit of setting an ice flow as a convolutional neural network instead of a traditional model, because first of all, as the forward model is much cheaper than it is. So what I did not say before is that we have speed up of order of 3 orders of magnitudes most of the time. It really depends on the setting, but if we really compare to the solver to an emulator, we could have really tremendous gain, which is mostly due to the fact that we can go directly on the GPU. I'm not doing some direct comparison GPU solver and GPU emulation. And so first of all, we can accelerate the optimization by the same factor, because if the forward model is cheap, so the inverse model is going to be as cheap, because it's inverse model is a matter of iterating over a forward model. But on the other hand, it also dramatically facilitates the inversion thanks to the machine learning machinery. I kind of try to summarize, I think, what I like also in this approach, because what we did so far, what I explained so far, was the upper part of this slide. So basically, we have our ice flow model in terms of neural network. And basically, the training was about tuning the weights, so which means the coefficient which are behind this, in order to minimize a certain misfit to some data, or all the energy associated to the Blatter-Patty model. So this is what we did before. Now, if we think about the inverse step is actually not that different, because we would have some observation, but this time we want to find the input that are minimizing some misfit as well. So which means that practically speaking, training or enforcing the physics or enforcing the observations are pretty similar operations, because the two of them are optimization problem. And the only thing that is different is are the controls, basically. So we are controlling the weights, or we are controlling the input. It also means that the way to enforce the physics or to enforce the observations can be done in a very similar fashion, which means they also sort of take benefit of the same tools which are essentially automatic differentiation. If we do this inverse modeling in a very simple setting, assumes that we have some surface velocities, and then we want to adjust the eye thickness in order to so that our ice flow model is going to fit as good as possible our eye thickness. So this would be the most simple case of data simulation. So we basically what we would end up by solving by minimizing this misfit of the surface velocity. So this would be the result of the convolutional neural network. So we want it to fit the surface velocities, and then we have some regularization term as well. I mean, as any everyone has to do this for obvious reason. Otherwise, we would have we have to reduce the number of solutions and then to reduce the pool of admissible condition solutions. And the nice thing here, if you look at this function, is that basically all the operations, the one that takes the eye thickness, that takes the convolutional network, and that take the difference between the two and the norm, all those operations are differentiable because the CNN is differentiable. When I say differentiable, it's described as a neural network, and the neural network are some operations, and then behind all operations, we also remember all, not only the operation, but all the gradients. And that's exactly what we need in order to, at the end, to find a gradient that would minimize and to find some descent direction that would make an iterative solver such that the hn plus 1, the cost at time h plus 1 is lower than the cost at time n, and then for that we need to update h according to certain a good direction, and this direction will be sort of given almost for free because all the gradients are available, and then we just have to take them. So all the optimization itself, all the tools are something that technically speaking are very almost straightforward because all those tools are available. Okay, this would be the most general case where we could now think about setting the problem in terms of multi-control variable, where instead of only controlling the eye thickness, we would control also the rate factor. We could also control the surface topography, and then we basically the more control, we could add the number of control, and then we can also add the number of costs if we have more data. In the sort of it's hard to say traditional modeling. It really depends what we call for that. But I would say in general, the main difficulty behind this is to find the descent directions, and that is done usually using a Nijgen problem, and this is could be tricky to derive, and it's also computationally expensive. And here the main advantage is that, as I said, it's almost we get those derivatives almost for free. In a way that, technically speaking, in the code, you just have to define your control, you define all the operations that go from the control to the cost, you mention your cost, and you basically require this to compute the gradient, but this is something which actually you don't have to do yourself, and it's, again, computationally inexpensive. Okay, a short example on some glaciers that we have in Switzerland, which are very well measured, observed. Rhone Glacier and Allèche on the right, where we have those eye thickness profile. We have surface velocity. So here, this is a data set from Rome and Milan, paper from 2022. Also have some eye thickness profile, as I said, and then also using the RGI outline to kind of to discriminate the outside of the glacier. And basically, I'm running the full optimization, so which means I'm optimizing for eye thickness, but also sliding coefficient. And the result would look like something like this. So basically, after iteration 0, we have our cost, so our STD to the eye thickness profile or to the surface velocity are very high number because there is obviously a very bad fit. It's all 0, and then through the iteration, those numbers get reduced, and then at the end, we get a pretty decent fit to the eye thickness with a STD of 10 and then STD of 11 for the velocities. And what you can see here is also the variation of the it's a variable that combine actually ice viscosity and sliding. The important thing I want to mention is that this inversion is something that took less than 1 minute on my laptop. So this is, again, very computationally efficient. Very recently, we had a paper actually led by Samuel Cook, who is working in Lausanne, and he basically generalizes this using this strategy, and he applied it to all the glaciers in the Alps. And he also did basically he took the advantage of having a glacier, a model which was well initialized, such that by initializing the model in a proper way, when we strongly reduce the shock, this initialization shock that is pretty common when the data and the physics are not in line, and that's allow him to do some prediction, especially in the short term, and that's mostly the focus on the paper, to do some projection until 2050, and also to measure the quantity of ice that is committed. It was in the Alps. Okay, just check the time. Okay, it was pretty. No, okay, half an hour, perfect. Okay, I would like to give now a bit more an overview of the model, just some features. So as I said, so it's implemented in Python, and it's also done to be compatible with other tools, and mentioning especially OGGM, which is very nice, because actually IGM and OGGM are sort of talking to each other, and OGGM is very useful for IGM, especially for providing data. And we have been also working on including the possibility of using some ice flow emulators in OGGM as well. It has a model-wise structure, which also facilitates coupling as customization. I will explain a bit more what is this model-wise structure. It now includes a high-order 3D and also ice flow thermomechanics. We implemented also the ice enthalpy model inside. It's not fully tested yet, but there is at least a minimal ice enthalpy and a minimal subglacial hydrology, which is highly inspired from PISM. And then there is basically all this coupling available, but not much was tested so far. But all those components are implemented. Okay, so the computational efficiency is very important, because all of these run in vectorial on CPU and GPU. And again, we kind of take benefit of those automatic differentiation. So it's also good to mention that all the data are presented on the 2D horizontal raster grid. So basically, that's the main assumption behind IGM, is that all the data are presented on the 2D raster grid, and so there is no real way of doing any mesh refinements. And this is also due to the fact that we are using some convolutional neural networks, which are basically taking some 2D raster grid in input. So this is something which is sort of, well, say differently, if we would like to go for some mesh refinement, we would have to take a completely different strategy. Okay, everything is on the GitHub page, documentation, and so on. It's also now runs on the 3 platform, Linux, Windows, and Mac. It's also, in fact, installing it should be pretty easy. It's a matter of few lines of code to also do the pip install. It's slightly a bit more demanding if we want to get the GPU working, but then usually that's the main thing if we want to especially to treat some very large arrays. But by default, the installation goes on the CPU, and then usually we slightly need to work a bit more for making GPU working. But usually it's very well. It's a very good investment. Also, I wanted to explain that IGM is organized model-wise, and the main thing is that it's really done in a way such that everyone can come use some modules, and then if he or she is not happy with the modules, he can easily take a module, customize it its own. And basically what we do when doing an IGM run, we select a certain number of modules. So there are some pre-processing modules, especially, for instance, this OGGM shop, which allows us to, from one RGI ID, to get nicely all the data using OGGM on the right grid, and then which make us ready to go for a run. Or we can run some externally, some netcdf or tfile, and then one step could be done with this optimize, which is this data assimilation procedures that I described before. And then for the processing, It's really up to the user what he or she wants to have. The mandatory is to have a loop over update of the ice flow, the times, the ice thickness, and then we can also build some own climate module, some own SME module, and there are some more also optional modules which goes if we want to have the enthalpy or if we want to track some particles. It's also something possible. And there is also a bunch of post-processing module. And again, there is the code is in the state it is now. It has quite changed a lot over the last year. Also, it's also as a result of the community, which is pretty growing. But still, it remains something which is quite in development, which is not always extremely always documented. So we are really working on this. And now I would like to finish by showing you a short demo of IGM. I'm afraid it's going not to be super rapid, but basically what you have here. Unfortunately, I think my screen is pretty low resolution. I don't know whether you can read or not. Okay, I hope you can. Basically, all what I have here is a parameter file. And in this parameter file, I basically call the module I want to load. So here I have a module, I call the module OGM shop, and then I call a climatic module, SMB, ice flow, and then I have some post-processing module as well. And here I basically order an AGI ID. So if you are interested to test, you can also choose the RGI ID of a glacier that you like, and then you can just replace it, and then you will be directly capable to do a run. And then now I basically run IGM here. So before doing this, I made sure that I was on the right environment. And here, normally it should be fast because it's running on the GPU. The problem is that, as I said before, because I'm on Zoom, it's already demanding, it's already taking a lot of resources. So that, in fact, I think this is probably 5 times lower than what it should be. So yeah, that was a bit my fear. By doing this, I probably should not have shown this. Okay, everything is super slow. But here you can see basically an advance and retreat of FH. And again, it's really slow, but it's basically because all the resources are taken. So it should have been done. The 300 years should have been done now. Okay. Yeah, basically this is what looked like a run, and then afterwards you can look at some output file. Like here, this is a thickness that I just generated here with some netcdf file. Yeah, okay. The goal is not to do a tutorial on this, so I will go back to my slides. As I said, we have GitHub repo. If you are interested to join the community, contribute, get support, we have Discord chat, and I think very quickly we have a Twitter channel. There are some video tutorials, and there is one video tutorial and sort of a concept paper, which is sort of this technical description. And so, as I said before, now we have yeah, almost 40 users, so it's growing pretty fastly. And so it's pretty challenging to maintain a code in that which is still under development, but then you are very welcome to test it and then to join on Discord. And yeah, I'm very happy to answer any questions.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. So the way that we usually do questions is we ask people to indicate on the chat, just to write a comment to indicate they'd like to ask a question. So if you'd like to ask a question, you've got lots of applause going on there in the little icons. Is there anyone who'd like to ask Guillaume a question at all? You can also raise your hand. I think I can see those if you do that. Let me also. Paco, would you like to unmute yourself?
Yes. Can you listen to me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Guillaume, really it was really excellent and beautiful talk. I really enjoyed. Before attending the talk, I had a question already and was related to the thermomechanical, when the thermomechanical. And then I have been surprised positively that this is already on the way. Did you mentioned something about the fact that it is still under test, this enthalpy module, or is it fully implemented?
Yeah. Hi Paco, and thanks a lot for your nice comment about enthalpy model. So it's implemented. Everyone can test it. It's computationally very efficient because the nice thing with enthalpy is that we can resolve it column-wise, which means it goes on the GPU very well because it's still a 3D problem, which means it. So it was a lot of effort to implement it correctly. The thing is that it's tested it is tested only kind of partially. So which means I did those exercises for. There are some, I don't remember the name of the exercises for testing the thermic part, but it's not fully. It's to be used with some care. it's ready. It's ready to test basically. It's not entirely tested, and we did not. I can't really show things that are working the same way that it would work with another thermomechanical model now, but that should. I think we should get to this stage rather soon.
And how does it compare in terms of execution time? Does it take much more?
Yeah, it's roughly speaking, it takes roughly speaking the same time to compute the ice flow than it takes for the enthalpy. The thing is that the enthalpy, so we can really resolve it on column-wise, and which means it gets really dependent on the number of layers. So if we have 3 times more layers, it will be 3 times more expensive. For the ice flow, it's not the case because it's not scaling with a number of layers. But in general, I would say a rule of thumb is that we have roughly speaking the same time. And again, the thermic part is not emulated at all. It's traditional numerics. It just parallelize, it just solve column-wise, which is very compatible with this TensorFlow because everything is parallel. Basically, most of the workload is things that are easily parallelizable.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Olga, do you want to go next?
Yeah, great. Thanks a lot for the talk. I was wondering how scalable the whole thing is. So you mentioned at one point that you need to have something like 100,000 weight functions or something like that. And I suspect that that number will increase substantially if you would like to use something similar on a scale, say Greenland ice sheet. So how scalable is it?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot for the question. So basically, the scalability, I would say, is not a problem typically if we are basically working with a grid which is 2K times 2K, and then if you go to 4K times 4K, it's absolutely no problem as soon as your GPU has the resources and the memory to take this. The main problem is that basically, if you are working with increasing domain, you will ask a same network with the same number of weight to be capable to model a large domain and a small domain. And of course, there is no miracle. You cannot expect it to be as good as for a large domain. If you are just modeling one single glacier, it's super customized for that case. It will be very good for that. So which means that you will get something that will deteriorate with the size. So which means the scalability, I think we have to redefine the scalability differently because you will not maintain the same accuracy. So the scalability is no problem in a way if you just look at your computational time, but then you will deteriorate your precision. And I mentioned this in the paper, but this is some workaround for when we are treating some very large arrays, because we have now people working really with arrays that are something like 4,000 times 4,000. So they are really large domain where we are just modeling in the same time thousands of glaciers, and this is of course kind of an issue because we have to enter the same all this knowledge into a single emulator. So I don't have a clear answer to your questions. I think it's just a matter of how to define it, and I think the notion of scalability need to be properly defined too.
Well, yeah, apart from that, then
Yes.
I was curious, and presumably then you have to retrain it if you move, say, yeah, from a collection of glaciers or from alpine region or
Absolutely.
like from northern Alps to, yeah, southern Alps, then presumably you have to kind of redo the whole exercise and retrain your neural network. Is it fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely,
Okay.
and all the retraining is something that, I mean, now we retrain all the time, basically. The question is that of course, that's something we want to mitigate. We don't want to do it too often, but then of course, the more you have some change, the more you will have to do this. I mean, in some way, that's the same thing. If you have a numerical solver, then your tolerance will be, your effort will be not the same if your glacier is near steady state and if it is changing rapidly. With that respect, this is not different.
Okay.
So
Great.
we have kind of similar issues and similar some numerical thinking are the same. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
I would say really the main, I mean, to me, the main thing was I kind of saw this like a deep learning, but maybe the keyword is more GPU. And to me, I saw this emulation strategy as a way to go on a GPU. But the main,
yeah,
the main,
so it's using different computational.
The main gain come from the GPU because it's really offered absolutely tremendous gain. Yeah.
So if you don't mind, and David,
of course,
please cut me off. So presumably then, if one would develop numerical methods that are extremely amenable and efficient for GPUs, then it wouldn't matter whether you do it via CNN or just straight old school fine element, like whatever. Is it a fair conclusion from what you just said? So the limitation is rather the computational cost and why the one uses CPUs versus GPUs.
To me, I mean, I cannot compare to doing some solving on the GPU because it's not really my world. If that was your question. So I don't have any reference, and I would not certainly not claim that we are cheaper than if probably someone who is also using the GPU. I use this as a sort of a relatively easy way to go on the GPU. That's my vision, and you may be surprised how if you look at the code, it's actually not that difficult.
Okay, we have a couple of other people who would like to ask questions, so we can come back to you, Olga, if you have more questions. Roland, you've got your hand up, and then Sohaib has a couple of questions in the chat. So,
yeah, thank you. This was a fascinating talk. My question is just out of this last discussion, you mentioned the thermodynamics being well suited to the GPU. I'm a little concerned that seems to neglect the way you describe the columns. That seems to neglect the fairly important role of horizontal advection in the thermodynamics.
Absolutely.
That makes the spinning up quite a challenge in normal models.
Yeah, sorry. What I did not say is that the horizontal advection is solved explicitly, so which means that we are doing this. We are not. I'm not neglecting the horizontal advection. It's just done explicitly. So which means it doesn't really require any, so the explicit way can be done in parallel. That's absolutely no problem. But we are not
does that not involve a large amount of communication between the separate columns, which seems to me likely to damage the parallelization?
Okay, I see what you mean. Though when I say I solve column-wise, it doesn't mean that all columns are not communicating to each other. It's solved column-wise for the diffusion. The vertical diffusion is solved column-1, so which means that this is done implicitly. So there is we are solving a small system here, but it's very small because it's only a few layers. It's 10, 30. They are small systems which are affordable and even in an exact way. But on the other hand, we are still advecting from cell to cell. So the temperature is advected from cell to cell.
Just remembering that for things like ice sheets, there's an incredibly large number of long time steps involved in propagating the thermodynamic effects right through the entire system. So yeah, I appreciate that almost nobody does horizontal diffusion, but I just wanted to raise that question. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just for the time step we are reduced are not different to the one that have other code with that respect. We still have some restriction on the time step, of course, to get the stability.
Yeah, it's rather hard to get around the current Friedrich-Levy condition.
Yeah.
Sohaib, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your questions? I apologize if I have mispronounced your name.
No, yeah, you have pronounced it correctly. And first of all, thank you, Professor Jouve, for this presentation and introduction about the model. I want to ask two questions. The first one is that, does this model give glacier melt as an output? And the second one is that, have you tried integrating this model with a hydrological model as well?
Thank you. No, there is no real hydrological model. There is something which is pretty minimal, but there is nothing truly with some I would say some water diffusion at all. For the glacial melt, well, that's something you can get as an input. That's very easy to do. Actually, it's not directly done so far, but it would be something you can integrate easily to any of the surface mass balance model which are there. And that's typically something that we like to do, and that's also why we are doing this in a modular way, because someone can easily customize a module to its own, and then I don't know if he or she wants to have some new variables such as glacier melt, it's a very few lines of code to add.
Okay, so I see. Yes, yeah.
It's not done now, but then if you are interested, just let me know, and that this is something we can probably figure out in a very short time.
Yes, I'm very
to get this
interested.
output. Yeah, just let me know.
I'm very interested. Yeah, therefore I have applied for the training
perfect.
in Switzerland, so I'm just waiting for the results. I wanted to apply this thing in the high mountain Asia.
Sounds
And
good.
yeah, so previously I did some research, but I did not include the glacier mass balance estimations in my previous articles. So now these are the opportunity. This is an opportunity for me to learn proper mass balance modeling. So I would like to integrate this mass balance modeling with the hydrological modeling and flood inundation. So yes.
Okay, sounds very interesting, and it's great if you can come to the workshop. So maybe that's a good thing. I forgot to mention that we are actually organizing a OGGM IGM workshop in Switzerland. It will be in the last week of August, and now the registrations are open.
Thank you. We're almost at the hour. It is time for one last question, if anyone has a pressing one. Otherwise, I think it just falls on me to thank very much our speaker for today. That was a great talk and some really interesting discussion. And then just to remind you that next week on 14th of February, so I think that's Valentine's Day, you can choose to come to the IGS seminar and listen to a talk by Inga Beck and Adriana Gugliano from SCAR, and the talk will be entitled Challenges of Addressing EDI Issues Within an Antarctic Context. Hopefully some of you will come and choose to skew the usual delights of Valentine's Day in favour of glaciology. Anyway, thank you very much indeed to tonight's speaker, and thank you very much to everyone who came and attended the seminar, and it will appear on YouTube probably tomorrow or as soon as myself and Magnus get to it. So thank you very much indeed, Guillaume.
Thank you very much, everyone.
So,
bye-bye.